Vitali Klitschko is, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked heavyweight champions of recent history. His brother Vladimir tends to steal the spotlight, having a much more extensive career, but arguably it was Vitali who was the better fighter. So let's discuss one half of the dominant Klitschko brothers and answer the question, how good was Dr. Iron Fist, Vitali Klitschko, actually? Vitali and his brother were raised on military bases, with their father, Vladimir Klitschko, serving as a colonel in the Soviet Union's Air Force. It was on one of these military bases that Vitali began to start training boxing. However, he wouldn't be seriously involved in the sport until later, as he found himself good at another combat sport in kickboxing, where he became a 6-time kickboxing world champion. However, despite the tremendous amount of success in kickboxing, he would opt to continue with boxing going forward, and would mass an outstanding record of 195 wins and only 15 losses in the amateurs. Along the way, he won the Super Heavyweight Championship at the World Military Games in 1995 and a silver medal at the World Championships. He would miss out on becoming an Olympic champion due to testing positive for a banned steroid, which he attributed to a treatment of a leg injury. This would result in Vitali missing out on the Atlanta Olympics, with his brother Vladimir taking his place, where he would go on to win Olympic gold. In 1996, Vitali would turn over into the professional ranks, signing with German promotional company Universum. As a result, him and his brother would move over to Germany, where in years to come, they would become national stars and make their adopted nation their stomping ground for their entire careers. Vitali would obliterate his early opposition, winning his first 24 fights by knockout, with almost all of them being in the early rounds. In the process, he became the European champion, and after making multiple defenses of his European title, he would put himself into a position for a world title shot, where he would face WBO champion Herbie Hyde. Vitali would come into the fight as the underdog, being largely dismissed by the media as having only faced weak opposition. Vitali would make an absolute mockery out of the pre-fight predictions and would announce himself to the boxing world. The 2-time heavyweight champion Hyde would make the fight competitive in the opening round, using his fast hands to land multiple shots from head to body. It would all come crashing down for Hyde in round 2, as Vitali's iron fist of a right hand would put him down multiple times, with the referee stopping the fight. Vitali was now the WBO world champion and would remain active, having 2 more fights before we entered the 2000s, successfully defending his world title on both occasions. In 2000, Vitali would suffer his first setback of his professional career when he took on American fighter Chris Bird. Bird was the much smaller man, being naturally a light heavyweight. However, he would use his more agile frame to be elusive in the fight and made himself a difficult target. Just like his previous fights, Vitali would be in control for most of it, but despite his best efforts, he would struggle to put a dent in Bird due to Bird's head movement not allowing Vitali to land clean power shots. As round 9 ended, Vitali was ahead on the judges' scorecards. However, he wouldn't make it into round 10, being forced to quit due to a shoulder injury. Despite many believing Vitali quit because he was mentally defeated, the reality was the injury was very serious, and by not continuing, he prevented a potential career-ending injury. Before the boxing world found out what Vitali was all about, the stigma around him quitting would linger around his name for some time. Vitali would remain headstrong and allow this minor setback to motivate him moving forward. Vitali would come back, getting a dominant victory over German fighter Timo Hoffmann. Hoffmann would be the first fighter to take Vitali the full distance. With this win, Vitali would claim the vacant European title and get his career back on track. He would get revenge for his brother Vladimir in 2001 when he took on Ross Purity. Back in 1998, Ross Purity would hand Vladimir his first loss of his pro career, stopping him in round 11. Funny enough, Vitali would stop Purity in the exact same round. Vitali was in control for most of the fight, keeping Purity at range with his jab, with the occasional power shot. He paced himself much better than his brother did in his fight against Purity, and would manage to open a serious cut over the right eye of Purity, which would ultimately be the beginning of the end. The fight would eventually be stopped in round 11 due to the cut. After a couple more victories, Vitali would get a chance to become a 2-time world champion, getting a shot at the legendary Lennox Lewis. Lewis was coming to the end of his Hall of Fame career, coming off a year-old domination of Mike Tyson. However, that's not to say he was washed up. The fight would be a competitive battle throughout. Both men would have their chins tested and would come through well. Vitali would start the fight aggressively, trying to establish dominance with his jab, and landed some solid right hands, but Lewis would respond with big shots of his own. Vitali had another strong round in round 2, landing a series of right hands which had Lewis hurt. He also managed to open a cut above the left eye of Lewis. In round 3, the momentum of the fight would change. Lewis landed a big right hand which opened a cut above Klitschko's left eye, and that cut would develop into one of the worst cuts I've seen in boxing. Despite that, Vitali would still continue coming forward, landing his jab and right hand, and made sure the round was competitive. Round 5 was where I felt Lewis started to really change the tide of the fight. Lewis caught Vitali clean multiple times, landing a big left hook and an overhand right in particular, which made the cut even worse. But for me, Vitali was still firmly winning the fight. He was outlanding Lewis, landing consistently accurate shots. Earlier, I mentioned that Vitali was viewed as having mental fragilities due to the ending of the Chris Bird fight. But in this fight, Vitali showed a lot of bravery and courage. Round 6 would ultimately decide the outcome of the fight. Lewis began aggressively, sensing the opportunity to further damage the cut of Vitali, and he did just that, landing several power shots, which resulted in the cut becoming even worse. But the still brave Vitali fought back and landed his own shots on Lewis. And at the end of round 6, the doctor examined the eye of Vitali and decided the cut was too much for the fight to be allowed to continue. Even though he lost, Vitali put on a fantastic display and gave Lewis easily one of his toughest fights of his entire career. The performance also did a lot for Vitali's reputation. No longer was he seen as this mentally fragile fighter that some viewed him after the Chris Bird fight. He showed a hell of a lot of bravery to fight on with such a horrific cut, and he proved many people wrong that night. So if anything, the loss only enhanced Vitali's reputation. In 2004, Vitali would get another opportunity to fight for the vacant WBC world title, but not only would he get a chance to become a 2-time world champion, he could once again avenge his brother, as he would be taking on Corey Sanders, who only 13 months ago shocked the world, stopping Vladimir in only 2 rounds. Sanders started the fight well and would cause Vitali some trouble in the opening round, as Vitali would struggle to figure out Sanders' style, and Sanders would use his superior speed advantage to beat Vitali to the punch. He would also find a home for his powerful left hand near the end of the round. He avoided Vitali's right hand and countered with a left-right combination, which had Vitali in trouble as he stumbled backwards. Sanders would yet again land that left hand and would have Vitali in serious trouble, but that granite chin of Vitali would help him absorb the big shots, and unfortunately for Sanders, the round would shortly end, giving Vitali a chance to recover from what was a brutal first round. Vitali would get the fight more in his control in round 2, using his height and reach to keep Sanders at a distance, and would land some powerful jabs and right hands to gain the South African's respect. Vitali would be in control for the majority of the next few rounds, taking control of the centre of the ring and popping out the jab at regularity. However, he still needed to be on high alert for that counter left hand from Sanders, which is thrown with lightning fast speed and high accuracy. In round 8, Vitali would punish Sanders with spiteful punches and would land at will for the majority of the round, as Sanders' defence was non-existent. The damage inflicted by Vitali was becoming too much, and the referee, quite rightfully, called the fight off. A very hard-fought victory for Vitali against a very brave and very talented fighter in Sanders. Klitschko would then defend his WBC title against former British and Commonwealth champion Danny Williams. Williams had the night of his life early in the year when he knocked out Mike Tyson in the 4th round, and he was coming into the fight confident of pulling off another upset. But ultimately, it wasn't to be, as the vastly superior Vitali would outbox Williams from the start, scoring a knockdown as early as round 1, following a barrage of punches. Williams showed a lot of heart to get back into the fight, however it would continue to get worse for him, as he would be sent to the canvas 3 more times and would suffer some nasty cuts. After the 4th knockdown, the referee saw enough and stopped the contest. It's actually insane to think Williams fought 53 more times since this fight, and fought as recently as 2023. In 2005, Vitali was meant to defend his WBC title against former champion Hasim Rahman. However, due to a knee injury, the fight never happened, and Vitali made the hard decision to retire from the sport. He was already dealing with persistent injuries, and at 34, he wasn't exactly getting any younger. However, as we know, this wouldn't be the end of Vitali's career. Despite the injuries, he remained passionate about the sport, and feeling like he could achieve more in his career, he would return to the ring in 2008. He would get a chance to reclaim his old WBC title when he took on the Nigerian nightmare, Samuel Peter.
Undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, who next?
After a 4-year layoff, Vitali would pull off arguably his best win of his career. He would control the whole fight and didn't show any signs of ring rust. He was able to maneuver around the slow plodding Peter all night, keeping him under a long and accurate jab. And after a complete domination over 8 rounds, Peter decided to quit, handing Vitali his previously vacated WBC title, and more importantly, would fulfill a dream of his to hold a heavyweight title at the same time as his brother. Vitali and his brother Vladimir would rule the division with an iron fist. Vitali would dominate in his defences of his world title. He would stop former cruiserweight world champion Juan Carlos Gomez after dropping him multiple times, and he would then dominate undefeated American contender Chris Arreola. Vitali would punish Arreola to the point where Arreola's corner wouldn't allow him to continue into round 11. After 2 more successful title defences, he would take on former champion and veteran Shannon Briggs. Briggs had very little to offer the champion. He had some success early on in the fight, landing some solid shots and boxed fairly well, but as the fight progressed, it became much more one-sided. Briggs showed a tremendous amount of heart and bravery, despite the punishment he received in the fight, and would be just the 3rd man to take Vitali the distance in his entire career. After barely losing a round, Vitali would win by unanimous decision. In 2011, Vitali would take on former cruiserweight world champion Thomas Adamek. The fight would be a case of a man versus boy, as Vitali wouldn't allow Adamek to build any momentum. Anytime the Polish fighter would come forward, he'd be met with a powerful jab. Vitali would continue to punish the brave Adamek all night, making him stagger into the ropes in round 2 and also in round 6. The writing was on the wall as Adamek looked hopeless in there. Vitali would show more variety in the later rounds, mixing up his shots with uppercuts and hooks, and finally in round 10, after more punishing blows, the referee jumped in to stop the fight. Vitali's last true tough fight of his professional career would come against Del Boy Derek Chisora. Chisora at this time was in his athletic prime at 29 years old and had just come off a fantastic performance against Robert Helenius. So he was coming into the fight with a lot of momentum, and he gave a great account of himself in the fight. Chisora pushed Vitali all the way and was utterly relentless for most of the fight. Chisora took the shot to Vitali well, and overall he did a hell of a lot better than the majority of fans and pundits expected, and he definitely picked up a couple rounds. However, despite Chisora doing better than expected, it doesn't mean he was winning at any point in the fight. Vitali, for a 41-year-old fighting a young pressure fighter, showed great stamina in the fight, considering he was constantly under pressure all fight, as he was unable to keep Chisora off him. Vitali would use his superior footwork and defensive skills to avoid any major shots from Chisora, and was never really hurt. Chisora did land some solid body shots and hooks in the mid to late rounds, but Vitali remained in control. After a very solid and determined performance from Chisora, ultimately the talent difference was vast, and Vitali would quite rightfully win by unanimous decision. In September of 2012, Vitali would fight for the final time against contender Manuel Charr in what is best described as a mismatch. Charr came to the fight and didn't disgrace himself by any means. He showed plenty of heart and some decent boxing fundamentals, but he was clearly many levels below Vitali. In round 2, Charr would rush recklessly towards Vitali and would be countered by a right hand, which put him down. He wasn't overly hurt and beat the count. Round 4 would ultimately end any hope Charr had, as Klitschko sliced open a nasty cut over Charr's right eye with a left hook. Vitali continued to punish Charr as we headed to the end of the round, and the referee decided to call the fight to a halt to get the doctor to check on the cut, and the fight was subsequently stopped. Vitali would get his 41st stoppage win of his career and would retire from the sport a year later, where he would continue further into Ukrainian politics. So with all that said, how good is Dr. Iron Fist Vitali Klitschko actually? Vitali would leave the sport having absolutely dominated his era. He was never knocked down, nor was he ever down on the scorecards in his 47 fight long career. He made the vast majority of his fights a one-sided affair, and that was because he was a fantastic all-round heavyweight. He had a granite chin, solid power, a huge frame at 6'7", but despite that frame, he could still move well and had good speed and plenty of heart. He also had a very good engine and was a very fluid fighter. Overall, Vitali, in my opinion, is easily one of the best heavyweights of all time and would be a nightmare for any heavyweight past or present. I will concede his resume isn't exactly stacked with world-class names, but it's not Vitali's fault. He fought everybody he needed to fight in his era, bar Vlad, but ultimately his era was very weak, and it shows when I read off, in my opinion, his top 3 wins, which were Samuel Peter, which was impressive due to the 4-year layoff, and also Herbie Hyde and Derek Chisora. Yes, overall, his resume isn't stellar, but Vitali is a prime example of resume not equaling talent. Vitali, in my eyes, is in at the very least the top 20 heavyweights of all time, maybe top 15, but his resume holds him back. So let me know what you make of Vitali's career, and where do you put him in the all-time greats of the heavyweight division?